Welcome back to AK Next Gen Vibes. In this video, we continue our Oracle FLEXCUBE Retail Lending Chapter 3 series. In Part 3, we'll understand how user-defined elements, or UDEs, are used in loan component calculations. We'll specifically look at UDE values, rate to use, basis element, formula type, and component periodicity, from UDE maintenance to component calculation. In Part 2, we covered the important UDE maintenance concepts. We looked at UDE rules, UDE values, UDE currency, and UDE cascade. Now let's take the next step. How does a UDE actually participate in calculating a loan component? The Oracle manual explains this relationship through the component configuration, particularly the rate to use field, UDE and loan component. The UDE can be used to define the rate used for computing a loan component. The selected UDE's value is picked up according to its maintenance in the UDE value screen. So, conceptually, we can think of the relationship as UDE definition and value, then rate to use, then the loan component, and finally the component calculation, rate to use. Now let's focus on rate to use. In the component configuration, rate to use is where we select the UDE that defines the rate used for computing the component. The value of that selected UDE is picked up from UDE values maintenance. So remember, rate to use points to the UDE, and that UDE provides the component rate. When is rate to use applicable? There is an important rule here. According to the manual, rate to use is applicable only when the component is defined with standard formula type. So the concept is standard formula type. Then rate to use can be specified. And then the applicable UDE can be selected. Where does the UDE value come from? A common question is, where does the actual UDE value come from? The component does not independently maintain that value. The manual states that the value of the selected UDE is picked up according to its maintenance in the UDE value screen. So, UDE values maintain the applicable value. Rate to use selects the UDE, and a component uses that UDE to define the rate for its calculation. Let's look at the example provided in the Oracle manual. For a subsidy interest component, the manual gives subsidy underscore rate as the UDE selected in rate to use. The value of subsidy underscore rate is then picked up according to its maintenance in UDE values. So the flow is subsidy underscore rate UDE value, rate to use, subsidy interest component. Next, let's understand component periodicity. The manual specifies two options, daily and periodic. With daily periodicity, changes to UDE and SDE values result in recalculation of the component. The recalculation occurs as and when the value changes. With periodic periodicity, the values and calculations of the elements are refreshed on the last day of period. So what is the practical difference between daily and periodic? With daily, changes to UDE or SDE values can trigger recalculation when the value changes. With periodic, the values and calculations are refreshed at the end of the defined period. There is also an important manual note. For a product having main and subsidy interest components, the schedule periodicity needs to be identical for both components. And for financial operations tax, or IOF, periodicity should be daily. Now let's look at another important concept, basis element. For a component using standard formula type, the calculation needs to specify the component upon which the calculation should be performed. This component is denoted by an SDE, or system data element. The manual gives principal underscore expected as an example for an overdue or penalty component. The penalty is applied on this element, and we are keeping the spelling principal underscore expected exactly as it appears in the manual. Rate to use and basis element are two concepts that you should not confuse. Rate to use selects the UDE and defines the rate used to compute the component. The value comes from UDE values. On the other hand, basis element identifies the component or SDE on which the calculation is performed. So here's an easy way to remember. UDE gives you the rate. SDE gives you the basis. Formula type is also important. The manual explains that if you want to use an SDE that exists in the system but is not listed as a basis element, you should use a user-defined formula instead of a standard formula. So, standard formula, use the available basis element. User-defined formula, use it when a required SDE exists but isn't listed as a basis element. Let's put everything together. First, we have the UDE. Its applicable value is maintained through UDE values. The loan component is configured using standard formula, where applicable. Then Rate to Use identifies the UDE. The basis element identifies the SDE used as the calculation basis. And finally, the component calculation is performed. Remember, this is a conceptual representation of the relationships described in the manual. It does not mean that all these activities happen on a single FLEXCUBE screen. Let's quickly recap the important rules from the manual. Rate to Use selects the UDE used to define the component rate. The selected UDE value comes from UDE values. Rate to Use applies only to standard formula type. Basis element identifies the component or SDE upon which the calculation is performed. Daily periodicity recalculates when UDE or SDE values change. Periodic refreshes values and calculations on the last day of the period. Main and subsidy interest components must have identical schedule periodicity. And for IOF, periodicity should be daily. Here are the 5 key takeaways. First, UDE values maintain the values used by the UDE. Second, Rate to Use selects the UDE that defines the component's rate. Third, standard formula is required for the Rate to Use field. Fourth, basis element identifies the SDE or component used as the calculation basis. And fifth, periodicity determines when UDE and SDE changes affect component calculations. The easiest way to remember the core concept is UDE Rate, SDE Basis. That brings us to the end of Chapter 3, Part 3. In the next video, we'll move to ad hoc charge maintenance. We'll cover ad hoc charge types, function ID CLDACT, and ad hoc charges, function ID CLDATOC. The Oracle manual describes examples such as legal fees, notary fees, and administration fees, which are applicable at the collection stage of the loan. So stay connected with AK Next Gen Vibes for Chapter 3, Part 4. See you in the next video.